The Route to Success. I'm here with Fionnuala Quinn, an engineer, and I love that we're featuring a woman in STEM, our first, as a matter of fact, on the Route to Success. So this is very big for me. Fionnuala, thank you so much for joining us on the Route to Success. You've had an inspiring journey from your career in engineering to founding Traffic Gardens. To start us off, what first inspired you to pursue engineering, and what has your path looked like as a woman in this field?
So there might be a clue in my name, but I did not grow up in the US. I grew up in Ireland. And I grew up in not the modern Ireland, but in the older Ireland. There's been a lot of social change in my home country. And I grew up at a time when girls had not done engineering. However, I was doing sort of the high level math, and the new dean of engineering, who had just come back from the US, he had spent time in the US, came back with new ideas and decided we need some girls in engineering. So he had a program where he invited girls from around the city of Dublin who were doing this particular math. And we got a day off school to go to the engineering school. So, and hear all about this. Would never have considered it. I grew up in a time and place where practically none of our mothers had gone to college, so we didn't know much about college. So this was a great invitation. And 3 of the 7 girls in my math class went on to do engineering, and 19 of us altogether did engineering. So that brought me into the engineering school. We were the first big class of girls, so they didn't really know what to do with this, but we did fine. And then 4 years later, I graduated and came to the US for my first job, not really knowing what an engineer did, but it seemed interesting.
I love it. I love it. This is usually a question I ask last, but I think it's appropriate here. For young women, and I will say it feels like for a minute we were being progressive and getting more young women in STEM, and it almost feels like we've taken a step back here lately. So for young women considering a career in STEM, what advice would you give them about navigating barriers and especially finding supportive mentors?
Yes. Engineering it's one of the largest fields and professions, so it's incredibly broad. There are all sorts of types of engineering, and within each of the types, they need all sorts of skills. So there's room for everybody and their skills within engineering because it's such a broad field. And it is a very portable skill because it's recognized all over. It's one of the reasons I could come straight to this country and go straight to work, because engineering is pretty standard. You do the same books, everything, everywhere. So it's a good skill. It's a good background to have. However, it does remain very male dominated. I'm kind of shocked how, like, so many decades after I qualified, it still remains mostly male dominated, unlike other professional fields, which have kind of evened out a lot. So I do think having a mentor would be a wonderful idea for anybody. It's always a good idea, but I think particularly in this field, because there's lots of things to navigate and little things that can sort of throw you off, and you need the confidence. You have the ability and skills, but not to be thrown off, because it can be a world where, it's a lot of guys that can say things.
Right.
So it's really good to have someone ahead of you. I wish I'd had a mentor. There was nobody ahead of me, nobody who sort of knew what I was doing. I did so many of my things. I was the first. So anyway, it would have been nice along the way if there had been people. So I highly recommend it. And I've tried to be as helpful as I can to lots of people on their paths. And it doesn't take a lot to both be the mentee or the mentor.
I would say if I was a mentor of somebody who was in engineering, I would provide chocolate and sit next to them while they studied, because once you get past algebra 2, my poor brain is just like, oh my goodness, but I could definitely give moral support. And I do understand the value of that because, everybody has bad days, everybody has off days, or everybody misinterprets what's said to them. And to be able to go to that level-headed third-party mentor who can say, hey, I've been there. So helpful. Okay. Now, I would love to talk about traffic gardens, your business. And I will tell
Mhm.
you, I first saw them, and I'm assuming what I saw would have been yours years ago, probably about 18 years ago. My daughter was about 3 or 4 in a mall parking lot. It was this beautiful community that was child size that they could ride their bikes or play on or do all kinds of things. And of course, I knew nothing about it, and it was in a different community. So I never got to experience it with my daughter. But with the first few, with that conversation that we have, I thought more about it as a mom. I thought more about it as a business owner, and I absolutely love it. Would you mind just giving us kind of an overview of Traffic Garden, and then let's dig into what an amazing business this is?
Okay. So a traffic garden, the way I define it, is a small scale network of streets and a representation of our real built world that's intended to be a car-free place for children and other new learners to learn and practice biking and often roadway safety education skills, and also just to have fun, fun and play, although we know children learn through play. So it's essentially a small built world for children. They have been around for almost 100 years. Back in 1937, a patrol officer in Ohio came up with this idea in Mansfield, Ohio. You know, he painted what was a parking lot. He made little traffic signals and little buildings. And he intended it as for roadway safety education, because this was a time when, motor vehicles had really been recently adopted. And one of the consequences was children who'd previously had freedom of the streets were now actually getting killed on the streets by much
Oh,
faster moving motor vehicles. Yes, it was a direct consequence. And his idea, which was very simple, was a sensation. Federal officials came down from Washington to see what he was doing. AAA came down. He got written up in national magazines. And the idea spread. It spread around Ohio. Now, it was called a different name then. It was called Safety Town, but it's still exactly the same definition, a small set of streets. And the idea emerged simultaneously in the United Kingdom, because basically they were having the same idea, the same issues. So it got disrupted in the United Kingdom, and I've been to the site, the original traffic garden there, because it launched in 1938. They had very grand plans, and then the war broke out. So it ground to a halt in the UK. They had a much fancier model. In the US, the simpler idea by the patrol officer just kept spreading and spreading. Usually called Safety Town, and then people called it Safety Village, and then people started building fancier versions. They started building real streets with curb and buildings and everything, and kids loved it. Now, the idea bounced around the world, and I went to a facility like this when I was a child. Absolutely loved it. It was the greatest day out. We called it Traffic School. So it came up in different names, and it's still all over the world. But the idea kind of peaked in the US in the 70s and 80s. And there was a woman who created an organization, and those people were, they had information, there were books, there was all sorts of stuff. And then when her nonprofit faded, the whole idea seemed to fade, although it was out there. And it sounds like you went to one of these facilities. It was inclined to stay operating locally. If there was somebody, an organization like Police Athletic League or somebody, continued to operate it. And to this day, when people realize what I do, and what I do is I design and plan and do everything around traffic gardens, some people, when they realize what I do, they react extremely strongly and start saying, "Oh, I went to one as a child," and they start telling me everything about it and all the details, because it does make a big impression on children. It is how children like to learn. They like these places that are just for them. But it's a very small minority of children who got this type of learning, and it just was dotted around the US and dotted around the world. And part of what I haven't really talked much about what my business is, but part of what I tried to do is put everybody, under the same term, say these are all traffic gardens, no matter what you call them, because there's actually about 30 different terms in English for them, and hundreds of terms in different languages, and saying, no, they're all the same thing. Let's gather them up. Let's look at them together, and my business kind of goes from there. So anyway, so that's what it is. A small world for children.
I love it. I love it. So when you started your business, as we both know, owning a small business is never easy. I always say it's more frightening than becoming a parent. What was the most critical system that helped you launch Traffic Gardens? And at the same kind of idea, what were the biggest hurdles and how did you overcome them?
I had been working for a long time in the US, and I had kind of switched my engineering, because that's something you can do if you focus on it. I had switched over to a field I was more interested in, which was bike and pedestrian design. So I had been involved in that field for a while, and I worked for a big planning and design firm. But meanwhile, I had other interests. I had long since been running a STEM program for girls in engineering at one of my children's schools, and and talking about design to children and all this stuff. And I had realized that even within my own design world that I was a part of, and even though we talked about children, we said, oh, they're really important. Their safety is really important. They're some of the most vulnerable users of the road. We did not focus on them. And, as a civil engineer myself, we look at the world as a built place. But we often build it for other things, with children kind of at the bottom of the pile. They're not really the most glamorous group to design for. And yet, who's more important? So I decided I'm going to create a business that's around children and design. I'm just going to focus on children. And I left my engineering job, my nice engineering job with this great firm, and tried to execute on my ideas that I had been talking about for a while. I'd been doing a few different things, and sort of I melded them together into this one business idea. And I pursued that for a while, and I had figured, I knew a lot of people in the bike and pedestrian design and advocacy world. I thought, well, those people will, be interested in what I'm doing, and I'll be able to find projects that way. But that was a bit of a hard lift, because there wasn't really funding for working with children per se. There was some types of projects like Safe Routes to School, but for the very reason that I set the business up, there also wasn't funding for the type of projects I wanted to do. And at the time, I really wanted to focus on introducing children to the idea of our built world, so they could be involved in how we design things, and we could include them in designs of streets, because we involved the public, but I figured we could create all these other materials that would speak to children and involve them, because they can give their ideas too. They love this stuff. And I did lots of that stuff, but and it worked. People loved it, but it wasn't an area where there was a lot of funding. And if you're going to do something, there needs to be a way to pay you. People recognized the value, but they couldn't. So I was getting a lot of small projects, and I was getting a lot of projects from parts of the world I had left from. But I also was getting a lot of odd comments and strange feedback, because there were a lot of people who couldn't understand why, as a professional engineer, as a licensed engineer, I would give that up to do this, to do what looked like just playing around with children and stuff, even though it had very serious design ideas underlying it. And but when you work with children, often it looks playful. I wanted it to be playful, because that's how you engage children. That's actually how they get the ideas. And there were a lot of engineers who thought I was doing it wrong, as they told me, because I wasn't actually teaching children engineering. And I developed a response, which was, that's not my job. They'll go to engineering school to learn engineering. I want to introduce them to big ideas about our built world. So anyway, so I did that for a while, and I did lots of great projects and really fun, but it wasn't the greatest business model. And there certainly were barriers in that, there were quite a few people who didn't take me seriously. I did, it's hard to express the value of this type of work that I was doing, particularly when it couldn't be quantified. I could tell from children's reactions. I could tell from the reactions of adults around them. People would be like, this is so interesting. We've never done anything so fun. Look at this. I had children cry at the end of my programs because they were so moved by doing design. But that value cannot be seen very well beyond the
Right.
immediate group. So, particularly when there aren't funding streams for stuff like that. And it wasn't really part of the engineering world to involve children. It wasn't really their job. So I realized all that. And I had included traffic garden design in my children's projects. That was one of the things I had children help me design. I had done summer camps where I had children build whole pop-up traffic gardens. We'd spend 3 weeks designing and building and meeting with public officials. I knew they were something children really loved. And of course, I had my own experience as a child, and I knew they were valuable as a learning tool. So at a certain point, after I did a pop-up traffic garden in DC as part of one of my summer camps, and I invited all sorts of public officials and university officials and all sorts of people, and they reacted and they saw what we did, a bunch of children with cardboard and tape, and they were like, we have to do this in real life. I knew there was a real life version of this. So I actually paused my business for a few months, went off, redid my website, redid all my names, my logo, did everything. It's very painful to have to throw away all the stuff you built, and people actually loved.
Oh, it is.
Yes, it's very painful because people actually loved it. Again, my stuff was very playful. And I came back just focusing on traffic gardens because I had realized, oh, this is the one thing that people may find funding for, that people actually are really trying to go get money to create these things. Like, I'm putting the idea out. This is the business. So I just rebranded and totally focused on traffic gardens, designing, building them, organizing them. Nobody worked in the field, literally nobody. That does not mean nobody designed a traffic garden. People were doing it. Lots of people had the skills in design firms. Projects would come along, they'd sort of go off and do one, but they were building it from scratch. They were using the skills they had from another area. There were no design guides, there were no rules, there was no advice on how to do it. And I was like, that's not how we do design. So I knew there was a lot of opportunity, not just planning and designing them, but creating all the design guidance and stuff like that. So it was a really good move. And again, people sort of said things like, why are you doing this? You know, but I knew I needed to make the focus much more clear. So that's what I've been working on for about 6 years now, where I'm just all about traffic gardens. And in that time, I've managed to really organize the field nationally, and now traffic gardens are going in all over the country. Not all because of me, but I've certainly been putting the idea out. They're using my design manuals. Whole cities are putting them in every elementary school, using my design guides or using my assistance. So there's a lot going on. States have pilot projects going on. Like, it's really by focusing on this one topic, making my services much more clearly about something that people really had an interest in, and then just doing lots of work talking about the idea and explaining it all over the place. It took off. So now it's kind of chugging along. So anyway.
So I'm just going to kind of unpack a little bit everything that you said there, because you covered about 2 years of graduate school in that statement. And it was wonderful. It was perfect the way you said it, because you very clearly identified a problem. You went to your target audience, and in essence, you did a community survey. You discovered what they liked by playing with the children, helping them to design it, which is key for any entrepreneur, because you never want to identify a problem and not get the community buy-in. And you did that. And then when you realized you needed to become more focused, develop that niche, you were brave enough to take that step back and do that hard work and ask yourself those hard questions that now led to where you are today. And I think if people will just listen to that part of your story and hear the hard work that you put in there and what it takes to get to that end piece where you are now, is so critical, because you're a living perfect example of how you run a business and that pivoting and adapting. So in that vein, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are struggling to narrow their focus? How did you clearly define who you were focusing on and narrow that, what were those key indicators for you?
Well, I will say I'm probably still working on that all the time. And I am always listening and sort of paying attention and sort of reading into almost everything that happens and trying to keep track of everything that's going on traffic gardens in the country. So I'm not sure how much advice I have, because I really was doing this, like I had a vision. And part of it is none of my ideas ever changed in the background. I had certain ideas. I knew what I wanted to do. I just started doing them in different ways. And I knew I would do things and I would say, well, that really wasn't worthwhile. And I would say, we're not doing that ever again. So I would try to be decisive about changing things and valuing my time and trying to figure out what was worthwhile. So I feel like it's just this nonstop and ongoing process of zigzagging back and forth, figuring out, because there's no model that I'm copying in my own field. And just, I did actually surround myself with, and again, this was sort of instinctively, with sort of pals and supporters who I talk to a lot, and who really have been very supportive and encouraging. They can see what I'm doing, and just hearing them recognize what I do has been incredibly important for me keeping going, because there's definitely been a lot of low moments as things didn't work out and, this and that. But those people who've really been with me all the way, and I always I try and tell them, and they're always like, but I haven't done anything, but they just have been incredibly important. But I will also say, I say that there's no model for what I was doing, but in the background, I actually was thinking of some other things I'd experienced in my life, or I'd seen successes, and I was like, they did, like following along with what they did and thinking, my world needs that. I need to do what they did for that topic. I need to do it for this. And just never really losing faith in my own ideas. And just plowing along until my ideas are visible. It's then like my ideas become visible and people are like, oh yeah, we love it. It's like, okay, well, great. It takes a lot to show your ideas. So anyway, I just had to keep going, which I guess also, I'm in French, so it's kind of a bit the same. I stepped into this country, I didn't know anybody. So you just have to keep going and zigzagging and learning all of the time. I'm never not learning.
Growth mindset, perseverance. You're hitting on all the key aspects of a successful entrepreneur. So with that, how do you personally define success, both for yourself and for traffic gardens?
Mm-hmm. Well, my business has to be a viable business. So that is part of the success. I could have continued my original business. People like that, but it wouldn't be successful because it wasn't being financially successful. So it has to support what I'm doing. So I have to be able to find ways to pay for my time and have people value my time. So that's part of and like I've reached a stage where people do value my time. And so that's one piece of success. And then that allows me to do what really is the much more important part of the success for me. I have a vision which is about children and learning and creating places, right, and taking old pieces of neglected asphalt that are lying around doing nothing and transforming them into places where when I show up, there's dozens of children having a good time and families telling me all sorts of stuff. That's my success. Like there's no greater success than for me to take a trip out to one of my traffic gardens, walk in and just see it covered in children having a good time. And that's success. I have other measures too. Ribbon cuttings, all sorts of stuff, incredible testimonials I hear from people. And it's like, great, we just used paint and some design ideas and we made that happen. So that's the real success.
I love it. So over the lifespan of your business, have you changed how you've defined success, or has it always stayed this consistent?
I actually think I don't change because I'm always looking to do the same things. You know, I'm always, and I haven't really mentioned girls and all this. You know, I do have an underlying thing where I want to make sure girls, girls are part of things. Girls fall out of when things are related to design, and amazingly, when things are related to biking, girls get left behind. They start out on an even footing, but by the time you get to middle school, um, biking girls drops way off. By the time you get to be adults, it's 3 to 1, male to female biking in the US, in most places, not all. And the same with my design world. So that is another piece of everything, of all my ideas, making sure that the work I do includes and draws and pulls girls along without saying this is for girls. But you know, if you look at my design materials, they're fun and attractive because I want to pull girls in. I don't want to, you know, put anyone off. So just keeping all of that in play, but nothing has ever changed. All my ideas, to me, going back decades, are the same. It's like girls, design, kids, changing the built world. We can do it. Let's just do it. And we can get things done by just planning and being organized. Nothing's changed. I've
I
always been
love it.
doing.
I love it. Have you seen, because you have colorful design materials, have you seen more girls gravitate towards you and be more involved, do you think?
It's hard for me to measure. And like, unfortunately, I can't keep track. I show
Of
up in lots of
course.
places. I do see it in real time. And I also, there was a time, particularly when I was in my former incarnation, I'd get invited to a lot of STEM events. I show up, you look around, and I always notice like there'd be some great table and there'd be all boys and one girl. And I'm like, I don't want my table to look like that, even though it was never supposed to be that way. So it's just something, these are things I'm always working on and thinking about and trying to make sure I sell things and I have all sorts of materials. I always have fun and attractive stuff. And I get a lot of feedback from people. You see, the world I'm from, engineering and design, often puts a sort of a very serious face on to the world. And I'm like, we don't have to. It's the ideas that are important. It's the projects that are
Right.
important. It's not what we look like. So I've just always tried to maintain a look that's invites more people, that's not intimidating. That's been a core idea for mine going way back, and I do think it works. And I talk to lots of women and everything. I do think I don't put them off. I invite people in to talk about design because I always say it's for everyone. Everybody should be involved. It's
Right.
our built world. We live in it. We should talk about it. We should be aware of it. We should tell people what we want and all that stuff. So yeah, again, core ideas I've always had, just figuring out how to execute on them.
I will say you are very approachable, very warm, and very easy to talk to, because when I hear the word engineer, I always think, oh, I'm not smart enough to talk to them, or oh, I'm a little bit intimidated. But with you, it's just like sitting down with an old friend. And I mean that very complimentary.
Mhm, sure.
I know you'll hear what is said, and that's a very good skill to have.
Mhm.
Um, what's one lesson you've learned from building traffic gardens that you wish every small business owner knew?
Um, I very much talk to the professionals in my field and learn from them and try and get invited to like installations and stuff like that. I can't assume anything about what I'm doing. And what I'm talking about is people who stripe asphalt. What my world does is I have sort of caused people who stripe asphalt or pickleball courts and stuff like that apply their skills and knowledge to what I want to do, which is create traffic gardens. So I have to go listen to them and learn from their experience. And it's been super important. I learn from every conversation. Now, they're not always they're not always sure why someone like me would want to be there. And I can detect sometimes a nervousness, like, why is this lady want to watch us working? Like, that might be, they might think I'm judging or critical, and just trying to open the path so that I can be there, and learn and listen from them, and then actually ask them, can I take a video, and can you explain to me what you're doing? And always being open to their knowledge, which is incredible. What I think I've done as a consequence, I've tried to make sure also that my clients value the people who did the actual work. So I've tried to make sure that, because, I'll be invited to the ribbon cutting and all that stuff and the celebrating, but I'm like, let's invite the installers. Let's have the installers talk. Let's have them and talk about their work. So I'm in a position, so that's been a terribly important part for me, bridging between the people who actually do the work and the incredible knowledge they have, and the fact that they are professionals and have skills that we have to value, not telling people how to do it, but listening to people, how they do it. So that's where a lot of my learning has come from, and that's been super important.
I think that's the best kind of learning. And I love how you are very acknowledging of the fact that there's people who create theory and design, and then there's people who implement it. And everybody has a key role. Everybody should have an equal voice, and everybody should be equally recognized. And I think that's important because so often we don't. We just want to not look at the guy who paints the lines, like you said, when we have to have the lines painted on the road. And I'm sure that's a skill. So I think that's important that you bring that up. And I love that you include them at the ribbon cutting. That creates that sense of community that sometimes we are missing. Okay, so let me ask you the really hard question. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice before starting this journey, what would it be?
Perhaps just maintaining confidence in my ideas, and belief in my abilities. I know I've done all sorts of things successfully throughout my life, but I can take, one little piece of criticism from an engineer, which is like off the cuff, and they don't really know what I'm doing or what I've done or don't appreciate it, and not to just to block that out. It has not been helpful, and just blocking them out and keeping moving forward. In every case, it's proven that I've been right all along. So I wish I hadn't let that kind of thing impact me. What I've been doing has been a little bit different. And when you do something a little different, it's not very different, it's just a little different. It causes people who are not familiar with what you're doing, or people who don't really like change or don't like you doing something as conventional as what they think you should have done, just letting that in. I wish I hadn't, because it did have an impact, and I wish I'd listened more to the people who were always encouraging me, because I've always had those people too. So anyway, that's the one.
It is so easy, and I see this more with women than with men, to focus on the negative than the positive when it comes to those pieces of constructive criticism. So I would say that is something all of us struggle with, not just you, if that makes you feel any better, because I will tell you, anytime I receive a piece of negative criticism or a mistake I make is pointed out to me, I beat myself up over it for days. And I don't know why, when some people can just shake it off and let it go. Thank you so much for being on our show today. If people want to locate your business, if they are interested in contacting you and hiring you to design a traffic garden, what is the best way to contact you?
If you head to my website, trafficgardens.com, and spend some time browsing, read the history. And, I've put lots of information there because I am an information center for the topic. But if you go to my services page, it talks about the type of work I do. It explains it. It has all my contact information. My contact information's on every page, but that's the best place to see what my business is about, what my services are. And anybody can just call me or email me. And I'm always ready to chat. There's also various videos on my website, which have been prepared in different capacities. So because those have been edited for different things, those are useful ways into the topic and to hear me sort of talk about different aspects of it. These are projects that can kind of go anywhere. Our communities are full of underutilized asphalt, whether on school properties, in parks, parking lots. We leave this lying around everywhere, and there is money out there now in different places to get to hire me, do my type of projects, and very creative people are good at raising money anyway. These are very doable, not very high cost projects relatively to other things. So just head to my website, sign up for my newsletter. I have a newsletter every 2 months, where that's where people follow along on the topic. So that's the traffic garden world. It's all based on my website. And there are lots of communities. If you take a look around, if you see on the map that there's a lot of traffic gardens in your community, there's probably a website and something else related to your community, and there may be a place to go in your own community, because there are hotspots right now around the US. So great.
Fionnuala, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for inspiring me, and thank you for reminding us how important it is to be brave and to step into new faiths, even when we don't know anything. I appreciate it so much. And if there's anything I can do to ever help or support, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Well, this has been wonderful. It's always great to chat about and reflect upon the things that I do. So I've really enjoyed this. So, and thank you for creating the forum where I can do that.
Yes, thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Thanks. Be in touch. Bye-bye.